Muskets. What are they, and how did they come to be? This is what we will be discovering throughout the course of this video. The term musket is used loosely here, because the actual musket firearms were only used in warfare for roughly around 200 years or so, while the general firearms such as cannons, hand cannons, and other various weapons were used, however rarely, throughout the late to high medieval periods, even in places like China, Japan, and in the Middle East. The most direct ancestor of the 18th to 19th century musket that we're all familiar of is the medieval hand cannon. This was quite literally a hand cannon, as it basically was a downscaled version of a regular cannon, or bombard as they called them at the time. These things were bulky and unreliable, so much in fact that it was likely to blow up in your face instead of killing your enemy. And it was extremely loud, and to a knight in a full suit of plate armor with a helmet that can echo things quite well, you would not particularly enjoy having one of these things fired at close proximity to you. These weapons weren't quite popular at first because most people didn't see the use. Yes, it did puncture heavy plate armor used at the time, but so did a longbow, and people generally preferred something that could fire much more quickly and accurately than a weapon that deafened them every time they fired it. These types of firearms were being developed in places all around Europe and in China during the 12th century, and the Chinese version was called, sorry if I butcher the pronunciation, Hailongjiang. On the left you can see a typical siege battle during the late medieval period, and you can see only a few men are using hand cannons because they were quite unpopular, and in men to the right holding a hand cannon. After a few more centuries of development into making this an actual feasible weapon, we get into something that actually begins to take the shape of what we generally consider a musket, the arquebus. This was a 6-foot-long matchlock firearm, meaning it used a lit match or a piece of cloth or rope to light the gunpowder using a lock to keep it in place and move it onto the gunpowder. These first saw use in the Kingdom of Spain during the early 16th century. These fired a .69 or .80 caliber musket ball and had many of the same traits of its medieval ancestor. On the contrary, this innovation proved to be much more reliable than the hand cannon. However, it was very heavy, and the standard kit of an arquebusier was as follows. Number 1, a bandolier containing 8 to 10 bottles of gunpowder, each filled with enough for one shot. Number 2, a powder flask to prime the pan ready for ignition. Number 3, a musket rest to steady the gun. 4, a knapsack containing musket balls, spare pieces of flint and strikers to light the match, spare matches, and the necessary cleaning tools for the matchlock. And number 5, the actual arquebus. All of this equipment weighed the arquebusier down tremendously, and with all the equipment clunking around, it ruined any possibility of an ambush or a surprise attack. This weapon was revolutionary, and by the 1590s, most of the armies of the day adopted the firearm as an essential tool in their arsenal. This began the era known to many as the pike and shot period, where armies mainly consisted of musketeers and pikemen up until the 1660s. Keep in mind there were many various types of arquebuses developed in the different countries around the world and many different models. There was no single arquebus. I would also like to point out that as the arquebus and later firearms were beginning to be fully integrated into the armies of Europe, you begin to see less men fighting in armor. Sure, there were still men that specialized in melee combat, but not on the scale that was the medieval era. But this also allowed for more intricate designs in uniforms, particularly in the mid to late 1700s, where you begin to see brightly colored uniforms and eccentric designs, with truly fascinating and sometimes terrifying outfits. One of my personal favorites, the British Grenadiers during the 7 Years' War during 1756 to 1763. The arquebus was not being used at this time, but I just wanted to sneak that in there. If you're interested in them, I'll put a link to a picture of them in the description. The next innovation, developed in 1615, is called the flintlock. This was an amazing improvement over the matchlock because everyone knows that when you strike flint against metal, you get a spark. This can be used to light the gunpowder as an alternative to using a lit match, so no more risk of burning your hand, and it can be used much more efficiently in wet and windy conditions. Loading a flintlock rifle was very similar to a matchlock, but faster. As another innovation, pre-made paper cartridges containing powder and a lead ball removed an entire step of pouring the powder down the barrel. This meant that the average musketeer had a lesser load to carry, and he could load the musket much quicker. The proper steps of loading a flintlock musket are as follows. First, pull back the cock holding the flint to half cock. Number 2, tear off the end of the paper cartridge with your teeth and spit it out. Number 3, pour a small amount of the powder in the cartridge in the priming pan. Number 4, pour the rest of the powder down the barrel, followed by the lead musket ball. 5, ram the ball down the barrel using a ramrod until it is thoroughly down the end of the barrel. 6, pull back the cock to full cock. Number 7, aim, 8, fire. This weapon was used from around 1660 up until about the 1860s, when the Prussians invented the first bolt action, but that's a video for another time. I hope you guys enjoyed my video on muskets. If you guys enjoyed, then leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this.